In a small, weathered town nestled between rolling hills and a winding river, a boy named Thomas grew up in a cramped, dilapidated house that barely shielded him and his 5 siblings from the harshness of their surroundings. The walls were thin, the roof leaked when it rained, and the furniture was a hodgepodge of second-hand items that had seen better days. Their mother worked 2 jobs, often leaving before dawn and returning late at night, while their father had long since vanished, leaving behind only memories of dreams unfulfilled. Each day was a struggle, and the children learned early on the value of sharing. Lunches were scarce, often consisting of a single piece of bread split 6 ways, and the siblings would joke about how they were all on a perpetual diet. Despite their poverty, the community rallied around the family. Neighbors would drop off bags of groceries, and the local church often organized fundraisers to support families like theirs. Thomas, with his bright eyes and quick smile, became a favorite among the townsfolk. They saw potential in him, a spark that suggested he could rise above the circumstances that had shackled his family for generations. He was determined to make something of himself, to escape the cycle of hardship that had defined his childhood. And he studied diligently, often staying late at school to use the library's resources. As he grew older, Thomas's hard work paid off. A scholarship to a prestigious university became his ticket to a different life, a life filled with opportunities he had only dreamed of. The day he received the acceptance letter, he felt a rush of emotions. Joy, disbelief, and a tinge of guilt. He knew that while he was moving forward, he was leaving behind the very people who had supported him. But ambition clouded his judgment, and he chose to focus on his future. At university, Thomas thrived. The world of academia opened up to him, and he excelled in his studies, earning accolades and respect from professors and peers alike. He quickly made friends with the affluent students who surrounded him, individuals who had never known the struggles of poverty. They introduced him to a life of luxury, dinners at expensive restaurants, weekend getaways, and exclusive parties. Thomas reveled in this new existence, and as his social status rose, so did his arrogance. He began to forget the friends who had stood by him during his darkest days and the community that had nurtured him. Years passed, and Thomas graduated with honors, landing a high-paying job in a prestigious firm. His success was meteoric, and he moved to a lavish apartment in the city, filled with designer furniture and the latest gadgets. He drove a sleek car and wore tailored suits, the epitome of success. Yet in his rise, he distanced himself from his family. When he returned to his hometown, he avoided the old neighborhood, the memories of shared lunches and laughter too painful to confront. He would cross paths with his sister, Sarah, on rare occasions, but he would pretend not to see her, his heart heavy with shame for where he had come from. As he mingled with his wealthy friends, Thomas often recounted tales of his childhood, but he twisted them to fit the narrative he wanted to project. He painted himself as a self-made man, one who had pulled himself up by his bootstraps, conveniently omitting the kindness of the community that had once embraced him. He basked in the glow of his new life, but deep down, a nagging voice whispered that he was losing a part of himself, a part that had once found joy in the simplest of things. But fortune is fickle, and just as quickly as it had smiled upon him, it turned its back. Legal troubles began to mount, an ill-fated investment, a lawsuit that spiraled out of control, and suddenly, everything he had worked for began to crumble. The life he had built with such care disintegrated before his eyes. The lavish apartment, the sleek car, the friendships he had cultivated, all vanished in a whirlwind of misfortune. He found himself standing in the ashes of his former life, stripped of his wealth and status, a once proud man reduced to a shadow of his former self. With nowhere else to turn, Thomas returned to his hometown, a place he had long since abandoned. The streets felt foreign, and the memories he had tried to escape now flooded back with an intensity that was suffocating. He walked past the old house where he had grown up, now overgrown with weeds, and felt a pang of nostalgia mixed with regret. He hesitated before approaching the community center, a place that had once been a hub of kindness and support. But as he stepped inside, he was met with cold stares and whispers. The people who had once cheered for him now looked upon him with disdain, their faces reflecting disappointment and betrayal. His siblings had moved on, finding their own paths and successes, leaving Thomas alone to grapple with the fallout of his arrogance. Sarah had built a life for herself, and when she learned of his return, she felt a mix of sympathy and resentment. She had watched him rise and then fall, and while she wished him well, she could not forget the times he had turned his back on her and their family. The bond they once shared had been severed by his pride. As days turned into weeks, Thomas wandered the town, a ghost among the living. The children who once looked up to him now whispered behind his back, their laughter echoing in his ears. They knew his story, the tale of the boy who had forgotten his roots. He tried to reconnect with the community, to apologize for his arrogance, but the doors he had once opened with charm now remained firmly closed. He was met with indifference, a stark reminder of how quickly fortunes could change and how deeply the wounds of betrayal could cut. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the town, Thomas found himself sitting on a park bench, lost in thought. The laughter of children echoed in the distance, and he closed his eyes, wishing for a moment that he could turn back time. He remembered the days spent playing in the park with his siblings, the warmth of their laughter, the bond they had shared. But those days felt like a lifetime ago, and he was left with nothing but the weight of his choices. As he sat there, a familiar figure approached. It was an old friend from his childhood, a boy named Marcus who had also grown up in the same neighborhood. Marcus had been one of the few who had believed in Thomas, who had encouraged him to chase his dreams. They had shared a bond forged in adversity, but as Thomas rose, their paths diverged, and he had lost touch with Marcus. Now Marcus stood before him, a mixture of surprise and concern etched on his face. "Thomas?" Marcus said, his voice hesitant. "Is that really you?" Thomas looked up, feeling a rush of emotions, shame, regret, and a flicker of hope. "Yeah, it's me," he replied softly, his voice barely above a whisper. Marcus sat down beside him, the weight of years pressing heavily between them. "I heard you were back in town. I didn't know it was this bad. What happened?" Thomas took a deep breath, the words spilling out like a dam breaking. He recounted the rise and fall of his life, the arrogance that had blinded him, and the misfortunes that had led him back to this place. As he spoke, he felt the weight of his burdens begin to lift, the honesty of his confession freeing him from the shackles of his past. Marcus listened intently, nodding as Thomas shared his story. When he finished, Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder. "You know, we all make mistakes. It's what we do after that matters. You can't change the past, but you can start anew. The community may have turned away, but they haven't forgotten who you are. You just have to show them you've changed." In that moment, something shifted within Thomas. He realized that while he had lost his way, it wasn't too late to find it again. He could rebuild the bridges he had burned, reconnect with his family, and earn back the trust of the community that had once embraced him. It would take time, humility, and hard work, but for the first time in years, he felt a sense of purpose. With Marcus by his side, Thomas began to take small steps toward redemption. He volunteered at the community center, helping with food drives and tutoring children after school. He reached out to his siblings, starting with Sarah, and slowly began to mend the fractured relationships. It was a long and arduous journey, filled with moments of doubt and struggle. But he persisted. As the months passed, the community began to warm to him again. They saw the sincerity in his efforts and the growth in his character. The children who had once ostracized him now greeted him with cautious curiosity, and he found joy in sharing his knowledge and experiences with them. He became a mentor, a guiding light for those who were still navigating the challenges of life. Thomas learned to embrace his past, to wear it not as a badge of shame, but as a testament to his resilience. He understood that his humble beginnings did not define him. Rather, they were the foundation upon which he could build a better future. His siblings, too, began to reconnect with him, and together they forged a new bond, one rooted in understanding and forgiveness. As the seasons changed, so did Thomas. He transformed from the ungrateful man who had forgotten his roots into a pillar of the community, a living testament to the power of redemption. The town that had once turned its back on him now embraced him, celebrating his journey of growth and transformation. He had learned that true success was not measured by wealth or status, but by the relationships we cultivate and the impact we have on others. In the end, Thomas realized that while he may have lost everything once, he had gained something far more valuable: a second chance. And with that chance, he vowed to honor the community that had once lifted him up, to give back in ways that would inspire others and ensure that no child would ever have to face the same struggles he had endured. The ungrateful man had become a grateful one, forever changed by the lessons of his past and the love of those who had never stopped believing in him.